The web to me was like, first it was like a playground, then it became an experiment in democracy.
The delivery of that information is based on an algorithm that you have zero control over.
One person might be working over here making something, and another person might be working over there, and they don't realize,
We need to do a better job, I think, as an industry, putting ourselves in the shoes of end customers and understanding what it is that they need so we can deliver on that. Welcome to Impressive Hosting, where we uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. I'm your host, Jesse Friedman. Before we dive in, remember to check out impressive.host. It's where you can comment on episodes, ask follow-up questions, and submit questions for upcoming guests. You'll also find all our links to follow, like, and subscribe wherever you listen. Today with me, Jeffrey Zeldman is back for part 2 of what was a really excellent conversation. We were diving into the browser wars, the way in which the web came up, our experiences with it. We touched a little bit on AI and kind of evolved into empathetic design. And I really want to dive back into that. But Jeffrey, before we do that, real quick, you actually just announced something inside of Automatic that Newsweek put us on a list. Do you want to just give a quick little shout out to what that is?
We're on the list of global most loved companies. It's the 5th year in a row that we've been a most loved company, and that's done through the BPI. And 5 years ago, we found out I think they wrote to someone at the company who wrote to me. I mentioned that I do some part of employer brand work that I do is letting people know what's cool about working at Automatic. And in order for us to get this award, we have a partnership with them in that we talk to them every year since we started this, but we've never paid them a penny. I'm sure they're very not thrilled about that, but it's not a paid friendship. It's a genuine, just, what happens is people who work at a company write what they like and don't like about it. Takes 5 to 15 minutes, depending on how, there's effort, and there can be a lot of effort. And we had hundreds of automaticians, which is what we call people who work at Automatic. For those who are just tuning in and haven't heard Jesse say that already, probably 100 times, the other automaticians wrote and said, and people at other companies too, wrote and said, I love my company. Our CEO is fair. I know where I stand. I was supported during their health crisis. There was a lot of that from Automatic. So we won. And we were among the top 100 most loved companies.
Yeah, I remember we filled out like, was it an anonymous survey or something like that
it was a survey.
We were asked to participate in it. But I remember it being completely anonymous. Automatic wasn't filtering it. It didn't in any way go to Automatic. We were all just asked.
No, we never saw
if
it.
you have any interest, you want to share it. Yeah. I was very proud to be able to share that with my family this week. You had mentioned in the last episode, you've worked at Automatic for 6 years, and the worst days at Automatic are still better than some of the best days at other companies. I feel the same way. I've been here. I'm coming up on 11 years now at Automatic. I get my second sabbatical this August, so I'll be taking 3 months off to enjoy the beach and camping and writing and reading, spending time with my family. It's going to be a wonderful thing. It's an awesome benefit at Automatic. But I think actually we're categorized in the top 100, but are we in the top 50? Did I see we're 49?
We are in the top 50. We're 49. Yeah. The year before we were 44. This last year was very tough. It was tough for a lot of tech companies. It's tough for a lot of people in the world for a lot of reasons. Like, there are many reasons to be worried and stressed out, many disruptions happening to all kinds of things that we used to be able to take for granted. So.
Yeah, and I think it comes down from, it's a funny thing, because when I joined Automatic, we were a completely flat hierarchy. We didn't have, I think we were like 340 employees when I joined in 2014. And, you always had this direct line of communication with Matt. Then we built team leads, and we built division leads, and now we have executives, and we have a much more clear hierarchy. But Matt is fully accessible by every single person in the company. He holds monthly town halls. He encourages, open discussion. He is a pillar within this company that trickles down a culture that makes everyone, I think, feel very safe and happy. And, the thing I keep going back to when I fill out surveys like that is the autonomy that we have as automaticians, the trust that is built between us and leadership at Automatic allows for us to, work when we want to, work on the things that we feel will have the most impact, focus our efforts where we feel like, we can do some good. And then, of course, giving back to the WordPress community, which is a huge part of what we do at Automatic, which kind of leads into another conversation, which is like, like how do we as an industry solve for some of the problems that we're seeing where, there's a lot of this extraction. You talked a little bit about private equity in the last call. Jeffrey Zeldman is back for part 2 of what was a really excellent conversation. We were diving into the browser wars, the way in which the web came up, our experiences with it. We touched a little bit on AI and kind of evolved into empathetic design. And I really want to dive back into that. But Jeffrey, before we do that, real quick, you actually just announced something inside of Automatic that Newsweek put us on a list. Do you want to just give a quick little shout out to what that is?
We're on the list of globally.
One of the things that I see frequently with hosting companies, plugin companies, others is that they will make millions of dollars, sometimes even billions, off of the back of open source software, and they're not giving back to the community as much. And I don't think it necessarily is any one way to do that, but I think one thing is that it's about a responsibility back to that customer to ensure that they're successful. One thing that we keep going back to over and over again is that if you take the time to take in a customer, you're taking that customer from another hosting company. And so you have a responsibility to that customer to make sure they're successful so that they don't end up going to a non-WordPress solution out there. And so to circle all this back, like WordPress is foundationally built on the open web. We were talking about the open web. Where do you think the internet is going these days? Because you've talked many times in the past about the difference between the web and the internet. And one of the things I keep thinking about is that, the
I
social
corrected
media.
it in
Oh, you
in a
did?
job description today. Someone said you're passionate about the open internet or something, and I just looked at
Yeah.
the sentence and I was like, they mean web,
Yeah,
and
right.
I changed
Right.
it.
Exactly.
I changed it. I mean,
Well,
I
I,
marked
I
it as
think
a
it would be really
suggested
great for you to
change.
tell us
Yeah.
what the difference is. Like, what do you see the difference between the web and the internet and social media and individually owned websites? Like, and how is that related to
Many
trends that we're seeing?
differences. There are many differences, but one that I would say immediately is that I wouldn't the web protocols are not necessarily the best way to build a spying machine that spies on everyone. There are internet protocols that you can do that with, and they can be in apps. They can be in websites, like embedded in websites as a piece of malware. The web to me was like, first it was like a playground, then it became an experiment in democracy. And for me, it still is that, and a supporter of democracy. And for me, it is that, like, that in theory, anyone can say anything, no matter where they are and all that. That really resonates with me. I know it's
Yeah.
not true in some places for some people. I know there are people who are afraid of they might be killed or disappeared in some parts of the world right now.
But I think that I think a lot of that is driven by the fact that so much of the internet now is consumed through these social media platforms that control
Yes,
the narrative and the rhetoric
yes.
and are pumping information specifically so that they can drive antagonistic views, right? It's not even that they take a position, it's just that these algorithms are designed to create friction, right, between people
It's
because
they're
it
designed to
drives
make
more
like
engagement.
sharks, jets, come meet on the playground. Bring your chains, bring your knives. It's going to be bloody. That's what people are
Yeah,
excited about. It's
right.
a physically safe way to just let your angry monkey out and really just fucking go to town on somebody. Is it
Yeah,
okay that I
right.
just swore? I don't know.
It's
You can bleep
absolutely
it out.
fine.
Okay.
I'm not worried about it at all. think that we're in a place now where, like, it's the anonymity, it's the problem that we're facing with the fact that we don't even know who's writing things anymore. We watch these
Right.
accounts arrive overnight, say something that drives, debate and frustration and anger, and then they disappear and then they don't even exist anymore. But more than that, though, it's like there's the political landscape of it, but then there's the fact that, people are being introduced to the internet as if it is Instagram, as if it is TikTok or Facebook. And they are coming up thinking that there isn't another part of the internet out there that will allow for self expression. And so, it's funny because I think that a lot of times people think to themselves, like, well, I mean, unless you're writing something that's straight up illegal or, that is like overtly bigoted or racist, you can pretty much say what you want on Twitter and Facebook and everything else. The problem that I don't think that people recognize is the fact that the delivery of that information is based on an algorithm that you have zero control over. And so it doesn't matter if you're writing anything you want, if people don't or aren't able to access it, then you might as well just be, writing it on a piece of paper and throwing it into the trash.
You, there was that woman who wrote something kind of hateful on Twitter. I don't remember exactly what she wrote or what group she insulted. It wasn't her best moment. And she couldn't take it down while she was flying. And when she got landed, I'm sure you remember this news story, when she landed at the airport and she had been flying there to meet at her company headquarters. She was told she had no job and couldn't enter the building.
Right. I do
because,
remember this. Yeah.
okay, because like during her 4-hour flight, uh, you know, Twitter had just, here's my thought. The algorithm found, I don't know what, a bad word, the N word. I don't know what she said. It had some kind of filter for bigotry, but instead of using it to say, let's show this to fewer people because it's not good, or maybe just not boosted at all.
Right.
Let's not signal boost this. Let's send them a warning if they keep talking this way. We don't tolerate that on our server. In our terms
Yeah.
of use, sorry, go
Right.
talk that way somewhere else. But right, because that's not impinging on freedom of speech. That's just a private company has a right to decide to say this is the speak. These are our codes of conduct, and expect people to oblige. Yeah. But anyway, what if the algorithm went, send this to as many people, and send this, and I know who to send it to. Like, send it to people who it knew would be enraged, and it wouldn't even take very smart AI to really do this. Like look for this. Clusters of these words indicate a bigoted thing is probably being said. Clusters of these words indicate a sort of knee-jerk liberal rejection of any kind of bigotry. And just put those together as a match, because that will make, more ad views, more screen views, or whatever they're
Well,
actually using it for.
I think there is some proof out there that, I'm trying to think about where I saw
That
this
it is.
report,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
it what is it? Anger by design. It's the idea that
Oh,
the fact that the more antagonistic, the more friction it creates, the more money and revenue it drives to a social media platform. I guess what I'm trying to do is like set up a stage here to circle this back to us having a conversation about hosting companies missing an opportunity here to present WordPress as a way for someone to have an individual voice, to express themselves in a way that isn't reliant on an algorithm that they have zero control over, and that they can, kind of welcome back the old web. And I think it's in the benefit of not only the open web and the weird old way in which we used to express ourselves, but from a commercially viable standpoint, it means more websites for hosting companies. It means more web projects, more signups, more everything. And I don't really see us expressing it that way in hosting, like the way in which a hosting company presents itself. It's very much like you can build a website for merchant reasons, or you can build it for e-commerce reasons or whatever. But the way in which WordPress.com got its start in having a free blog for everybody, and it still exists today. You can go sign up right now. I don't see that being used as much anymore. And I wonder if social media is at a place now. Is it at an inflection point where we can start to maybe see and siphon off some of those people back into the web and out of those walled gardens? Or are we kind of like lost in it? I don't know.
Well, back then we used web rings. You remember or you'd have a sidebar where you linked to like 5 websites you liked, and everybody
The
linked
blog
to
roll for
the
WordPress. Yeah,
blog
yeah.
roll. It's a blog
Yeah,
roll.
right, right.
That's
Yeah,
still a totally viable way, and you can spend just as much time buzzing around, and you can get those same dopamine hits that you get from social media. But
right.
as you say, you're making the choice of where you go next.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that I would love to see a place where we're getting the people who are using social media to build traffic quickly, to build a community, siphoning off some of that back into website properties that they actually own
Well,
themselves, that they control.
you, even Mastodon and Blue Sky are pretty terrible at like providing um, link. They're not like every link gets clicked or people click through, or they don't necessarily drive traffic to the sites that, if you have this WordPress blog and you want people to go to it and you write this great thing and you pick the best sentence from it and you quote yourself and you put the link and you think this will get them, and you've got a really nice illustration going with it, right? You do all that
Yeah,
and then let 2 people click. I mean, and
right.
if you put the link in the same post, Meta really won't even. It's like it penalizes you.
Well, they're
So like that's
incentivized
all
to
known,
keep you inside of that walled garden. It's very
right?
much like
That's
in
right,
the last episode when we were talking about the browser wars and the fact that these browsers were trying so hard to keep you isolated and inside of their little cocoon. It's very much
right.
the same way with social media. Like it does not benefit them to send you off to another platform or out into the open web. Because then they lose out on ad revenue, they lose out engagement, they lose out on all these things that private equities and large corporations look for
Right.
as terms of metrics to prove that they're actually being successful. And so, it's a hard thing to be involved in right now because there's so much consumption of the internet that is not the open web, that is not and we mentioned this in the last episode. There's an entire generation of folks out there, the younger generation, who doesn't even like necessarily recognize that Instagram and TikTok and all these are not synonymous with the web, that they are just singular platforms that you're living on.
It in the mindset that you're describing, based the experience I can and lack of some other experience that would enable you to to have the point of view you're talking about. Yeah.
So one of the things that we talked about in the last episode that I wanted to pick up on was, the advent of AI in terms of website builders. You had mentioned that Automatic released one. A whole bunch of other hosting companies are looking at it too, and so I think one of the things that we talked about in a previous episode, with Chris Lambiasi at Bluehost was, this idea that there is the leveraging of AI to help you succeed. And that I think is something that I'm personally, just my personal feelings are, I want to promote that. I want you to be able to accelerate and grow and succeed and get
Sure.
through the parts of building a website that might be challenging or hard that you don't necessarily want to
Right.
do. But
Well, like the word
where
processor was an invention. And if you could have rejected that invention, like there's, I understand a lot of resistance to AI and I
Yeah.
have more questions and concerns about it too, but to not use the parts of it that are helpful to accelerate your own work. I don't know. It'd be like uh, using a teaspoon to dig for gold. Like, you can, but now someone just invented the steam shovel. Why don't you use it? Oh, it's going to, but I had 100
Right.
guys with teaspoons. It's putting them out of work. Yeah, but maybe hopefully there's better work for them. Of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
that's not,
And I think
that's not
it
the,
remains to
yeah,
be seen, right?
that's
Like what kind of
naive.
an impact
Yeah.
it's going to have. But one of the things that
Mm,
I'm hopeful for is that AI can help with the things that streamline the processes that we don't necessarily want to do. Like you're talking about digging with a teaspoon. It's a good analogy because, you and I came up in a place where we were designing for the web because we had a passion to actually construct websites and build beautiful designs and tell a story on the internet. But the reality of the situation is that an end customer, a DIY, or someone who's building a website for themselves or their business may not necessarily have a passion in web design. They just want to get a
Right.
website live so that they can
Sure.
draw in some more customers or tell somebody about something. So I think in that way, AI can be very helpful. I think where I personally, again, this is just my personal preference, am wary of is that AI will start to take on the responsibility of the things that we're passionate about. Maybe replacing the work that we would do in being a little bit more artistic, or writing a great story or a blog post instead of and using AI to replace that. That's where I get a little nervous. But I do think that
Sure.
as humans, we have a propensity to seek out authentically human creative works. So,
Absolutely.
I think we can draw a line in the sand where AI can help with the structure of the website and help to build a menu and help you to describe a product. But then like you can still be a human in that you would, you know, put your own photography up on it. You would write your own content. You would tell your own stories, and you can find it and strike a balance in there.
I think you should write this, and I think you should have a proposal, and just brainstorming for a second. What would such a proposal be? What would you propose that a hosting company should do to take advantage of this opportunity?
Yeah. Well, I think, what we had just touched on too is like drawing the line in the sand between your passion and letting AI take care of some of the other stuff.
Right.
Um, so, in terms of what a hosting company can do in that area, then like, we can start to think about like tying in back what we were talking about earlier, which is like empathetic design, which is that, you can use AI to maybe solve for some of the struggles that people have. If we do better segmenting and we do a better job of understanding what the customer is struggling with or their actual goals, maybe we ask the question bluntly, do you actually even want to build a website? Because the answer probably is no. It's not that I want to learn the skills of becoming a web designer. It's just that I want a website so that I can, get my business online or whatever it might be. But one of the things that you had mentioned is like some of the concerns around whether or not AI is going to do a poor job of constructing the website. Like what front page you had
In
mentioned,
terms
like
of
front page.
accessibility, right? So
Right,
it would
right,
all
and
be
yeah,
meaningless divs and no semantics, and
right,
someone trying to navigate with a screen reader. It would just be like, here, click here, click here, click here, click. Like it would be
yeah. And
torture.
what you're referring to, like with front page, is the old ways of like people may not remember this, but there was something called a WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get, which was a revolution in the way in which we were building. It was a poor revolution, in my opinion, but it was a revolution in the way in which we were building websites because it was going from a place of we were coding the HTML, coding the CSS, slicing up our images ourselves, and then all of a sudden front page comes out and Macromedia had Dreamweaver and other things out there where you could literally move things around like it was a Word document. And then it would write the code in the background for you. But the code itself was sloppy. You would end up with like nested elements inside of the nested elements, semantically hard to read. It was such a pain. But you know what I think is really interesting is when we combine AI with the foundation that Matt built with Gutenberg. Because instead of us saying, hey, let's write the code, let's have AI write the code to embed an image, we just tell it to embed an image block, which is already semantically correct and well formatted, right? So the AI doesn't necessarily have to get into writing specifically the HTML and the CSS for the layout of the page, but instead it can focus on using design elements that are already well built and functional to, frame the way in which things work or to move them around or things like that. So I think in that
Well,
way,
then
we actually might
where
actually
did
do better.
where's the HTML coming from? Surely there is HTML and CSS
Yeah, it exists in
for
that
it to
pre-made
be.
block. So it's very much like instead of having the
Oh,
AI,
using like if
yeah,
Gutenberg had every conceivable element, you could just pick and then like adjust values to,
right.
make something taller
So
or
like
yeah.
a Gutenberg block, right, for the cover block, for example, right? Like all you as a user has to do is upload an image, And then you can say, make it static, make it stick to the page, make it absolute, parallax scrolling, whatever. You don't have to actually write the code, but it's all well built because there's guardrails to prevent it. There's only so much you can do inside that cover block. And so, it only exists in
You,
that
you
well
make
formatted semantic way.
you make rules that solve that. I
Yeah. And then
I
the
understand.
AI,
I can't
instead
express
of,
it. Yeah.
yeah, no, but I think it's very much like Legos, right? Like, so instead of the AI
You don't
trying
have the
to construct each block independently, it already has these pre-built blocks, and then it's just moving them up and down or moving them around.
sure.
That's all. Yeah.
It's like Legos.
So I think in that way, WordPress actually has a leg up over other CMSs and non CMS based websites to allow AI to handle those things, because it's not about constructing a website from the ground up from a blank canvas and writing every single line of code. Instead, it's just about layouts. That's all, with pre-formatted blocks. And if you combine that with information that the customer gives you about their customer, about their journey, whatever they're building, AI can make, decisions on that, and then it's just moving things around. It's less about writing code and it's more about just kind of moving things around, almost like in a wireframe type format. So I'm hopeful. I think that, I think there's an opportunity there with AI to maybe solve for a problem that hopefully it won't cause more problems than it solves.
I think like reading AI summaries of some of my mail, specifically things like the bank, right? Bank statements, um, correspondences with partners, where it tells me like it basically pulls out the thing that's new. So
Yeah,
it's like giving me a summary. It doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. It just grabs the new piece, like under
right.
all the carrots. It finds the thing that's under the carrots, and
Yeah.
not Bugs Bunny carrots, code carrots, disclosure triangle carrots.
Actually, you mentioned the bank, and you reminded me of something that I wanted to say in the last episode, which is that when we were talking about browser wars and getting people to upgrade, and you had said something along the lines of like, what quoting people saying, "Why don't you just upgrade your browser?" And then we, at the moment, like, you're thinking to yourself from your perspective, I have a nice new laptop, or I'm working for this tech company and they provide me with a computer. I'm going to be on the cutting edge or the bleeding edge of browsers. I don't understand why you can't upgrade your IE, whatever. And it was the first moment that I really started thinking about web design from an empathetic standpoint, because
Huh.
what I realized at that moment was, after doing a little bit of research, was is that it's not it's not their choice a lot of the time. So,
Right.
even if they could afford a new laptop, even if they weren't in a geographic location that maybe doesn't even have access to more cutting edge technology or whatever it might be, they could work for a bank. And bank software is notoriously bad for not allowing you to upgrade the actual hardware, which means that your browser can't be upgraded. Hospitals were the same way. Universities were the same way. And you add all this up, and you end up with millions of people out there who don't even have a choice about what browser they're using. And it was a light bulb moment for me, because it was the first time that I really actually understood that it's I have to look beyond the scope of what's in front of me. It's not just my experience that I'm building for. It's an endless number of experiences out there. And so I think that, it kind of returns us back to that conversation that we've been having, is that, we need to think about that from a hosting perspective, from a website design perspective, is that we need to do a better job, I think, as an industry, putting ourselves in the shoes of end customers and understanding what it is that they need so we can deliver on that.
I mean, I always, well, no, actually, when I started, I just thought I was having fun making art, and who gives a shit? I'm just a frustrated artist, really, basically. Oh, I wanted to get in something about the history of all this, because we can talk about this again. At first, websites were very primitive, and you had to learn basic HTML and make them in a notepad or something. And we assumed, because there were so few HTML elements, and there was not that much. I just wrote tutorials and said, "This is so cool, you should do it too." And I expected everyone would learn HTML and then later CSS. I just figured everybody would do that, but that was a heavy lift. So
Yeah.
then came WordPress and other platforms, Blogger, etc. And I resisted. I only started when I started using WordPress, which was a free download. It was like the first time I used anything because up until that point, I was just writing in Page Spinner. I would type my paragraphs. I would type my copy inside paragraph tags and almost like I was typesetting a newspaper in my head. I don't know why. It just seemed intuitive to me to do it
Well, like
that
we
way.
said, so much of the web was designed based on elements of print design and publishing,
Yes.
right? Yeah,
And
yeah,
you talked about WYSIWYG, and it wasn't a problem with something like Microsoft Word, like Word 5.1 or Word Perfect, if you remember that. Like to be able to
yeah,
see roughly what it would look like when printed out of a. I mean, people weren't expecting a lot. It wasn't going to be the most beautiful piece of graphic design. It couldn't be. So there were limited fonts. The fonts were installed in the printers at some point in early prehistory, and so there were just a few fonts you could print in. It basically was like, is the headline bigger than the subhead? And is the subhead bigger than the body copy? Yeah, that's great. Oh,
yeah.
I can have a ugly sans serif headline and an ugly serif body to fight. Oh, cool. Just like a real book. It was such new wonders. People have no idea
Right.
in the 90s, and really, actually in the late 80s, when people like, I had a girlfriend who was a computer graphics person and real early. There was an Amiga operating system and these little they were like the Macs. And it was but it was a color screen instead of a monochromatic screen. It made Macs look like Microsoft by comparison in terms of what it could do. AMIGA, if you're Googling it. Although you'll probably just read some AI summaries if you use Google. And the
No,
AI
I mean to
summaries may be
tie it all back to
hallucinations.
AI.
Tie it all back.
So yeah, so in other words, you're thinking about like this is like a concern for the way in which AI could be implemented. Is that
Could
where?
be, yes, it could be.
Yeah,
It could. I'm less I don't think at some point it figures out. I don't think it's a sci-fi scenario. I could be wrong, but I don't see a sci-fi scenario where it becomes conscious, it unites all the systems in the world and then cuts off our oxygen until we die, or makes
yeah,
all our
sure.
planes crash and our elevators. That's conceivable. And that's what people
Yeah,
think when they worry about AI. But I
yeah. It doesn't
more
help that
likely
Hollywood portrays that as like the number one thing.
But a more
But you're right.
realistic worry is Elon Musk has the technology and he has a gripe and he wants to spy on people or he wants to take money from people or pick your favorite supervillain. It doesn't really matter who. The point is,
Yeah.
history shows someone, if the technology can hurt people, it will be used to hurt people. And so
Well,
that's
and
why I
I
worry.
think that we're actually kind of seeing that, right? I think what we're circling back to here is the fact that like whether it's social media, AI, algorithms, whatever it might be, is that there is an opportunity for us to very passively and subtly corrupt the way in which we're using the internet, right? Like it's affecting us on a level that maybe is not something that we can actually feel immediately. It's not tangible, but it does have an underlying effect on us. And I think that, just to kind of bring it all back home, right, is like that is the power of the open web and what, Matt Mullenweg and others who are focused on open source technologies and empowering a voice on the web is it's about giving you the opportunity to control the way in which your content is distributed and consumed and everything else, and that there are other things out there that can corrupt that, and and to kind of like bring it even further back home, one of the things that we can think about from a hosting perspective is like is the ethical best practices that the host uses for the way in which they consume data, the way in which they utilize tools like AI to build websites. We had Christian on from the I2 Coalition in a previous episode, and we talked about how the I2 Coalition is working towards creating a standards set for hosting companies in order to make sure that we're raising the bar for ethical standards within hosting companies. And I think as AI comes out, one of the things that we can think about there is like, how do we make sure that we're balancing utilizing these tools to help you be successful without doing things that are going to be,
Harmful.
systemically harmful in a global, more larger perspective? This is another great conversation. We've gone for another almost 40 minutes, which is fantastic. I could talk to you all day, but let me end the podcast with a little bit of trivia. You had mentioned a mutual friend of ours in the previous episode, someone you had a joint venture with. I want to see if you know this. Do you know who the original designer was of the WordPress logo?
Jason.
Yeah, Jason Santa Maria. So you had a hand in that as well. Right.
I was the
Okay.
creative director. He was the designer.
Oh,
He did
all
brilliant
right.
work.
I didn't realize that Jason. I didn't realize that Jason didn't do it independently.
Through
So that
Happy
was
Cog.
through Happy Cog,
It
which
was
was
through Happy
your
Cog.
creative
At the
studio,
time,
right?
yeah, it was my
Yeah.
little freelance creative studio at the time. Liz
Right.
Danzico
Right.
did the IA, and yeah, it's a fun story. Um,
Yeah.
so I okay, so we showed them how we would relay out WP admin, not only to be aesthetically improved, but more importantly, so that like functions were grouped together. It had sort of evolved open source style over time with many different authors. And it wasn't like they
Hmm.
had a hive mind. So one person might be working over here making something and another person might be working over there. And they don't realize, that there's some overlap and there could be some synergy, but they don't know because they don't communicate. So the two things, you know, that's how, websites that evolve over time, software that evolves over time, that's just what happens. So we made all these moves where if you were a new WordPress user, you'd be less confused about where to click to do what you wanted to do, we thought. And Matt said he was the only person we had to present it to. And we presented it to him and he loved it. And then when he showed it, apparently there was a lot of pushback from the
Yeah.
community
Yeah.
who hadn't been consulted, right, by us. We hadn't talked to anybody. So I think Matt just said, here's this new design. And people were like, no, is how I heard the story. But I didn't hear it that way till I worked here. So for like 10, 15 years, I thought it was a great success. In fact, afterwards, Matt asked if he could just hire Liz independently to do more information architecture work on WordPress. And I said, yeah, definitely. And I know that relationship continued for a while. But I had the illusion. I mean, Jason's logo kind of stayed, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. For sure.
everything else was thrown out. A lot of the changes that we mentioned, that we recommended, were not made, or they were made and then it went back. I think they were. It rolled out. Right. It wasn't like a.
I think
Matt
over
didn't
time
stand
we've
up.
gotten
Yeah. Yeah.
we've gotten
That,
better at saying to folks who use products every day that it's okay to see change, right? Like, people
right.
get set in their ways and they don't like the idea that things are moving around or whatever, and it freaks them out.
Yep.
It sends a chill down their spine almost, and so I think have a knee jerk rejection towards change, especially around a user interface that your work is tied to or something like that. So yeah, but I think over the
Yeah.
years we've gotten better as an industry in enacting those types of changes, and maybe we don't do it overnight, but we kind of like instill iterative changes over time to make the transition a
I'm
little bit easier.
I'm thinking that possibly, um, because we didn't do any initial talking to the people, like the customers who were going to use the software. So we didn't really hear concerns, like nothing that I would do now,
Right.
nothing that we would do, but so
Yeah.
we just went in blind, thinking about best practices and like that.
Which ties us back
And
to that
what are
idea, that
what
need
are
for
the industry
empathetic
norms?
design. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But
All right.
this has been like, we started with like kindergarten. Really, the industry's grown up really fast, but we really were a kindergarten at the beginning. And and
Right.
a lot of us miss those days in some ways because it was so experimental and playful. It seemed like you were doing something really hip, like making underground music or being an underground filmmaker or something. We
I
rode
felt like
around.
a cool, I felt like a very cool artist coming up. I did
Yeah,
not feel like a nerd,
yeah,
but I think then I
yeah,
started to talk about web design, and the next thing people would do is their eyes would glaze over and they'd ask me to fix their printer. So, so maybe I
yeah.
wasn't, fully aware of my own perception, but, all
Yeah.
right. Awesome. Well,
All
thank
right.
you, Jeffrey,
This
so
was
much
great.
for a great conversation. It was so awesome having you on. Yeah, I hope to have you on again soon.
That would be fantastic. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Impressive Hosting, where we uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. Do you have a follow-up question for today's guest, thought or comment on anything we talked about, a future guest suggestion, a hosting horror story? What do you think makes great WordPress hosting? All your comments shape this show. Drop them on impressive.host. We also appreciate you following us on social media and subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform. Finally, do check out our list of open source projects that need support at impressive.host. Whether it's code, community, or cache, you can make a difference. See you next time.